So I'm going to read 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with most of them God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Nor let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed by serpents. Nor complain, as some of them also complained, and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. And I'll just stop there. Now, why would I read that in preparation for 1 Samuel chapter 30? I bet it ties into the morning message.
Chapter 30.
So for the last probably how many years now, we've done 1 Samuel, next week's the last one. We've done Ruth, we've done Joshua, we've done Nehemiah. We've done a lot of Old Testament stuff. One of the reasons that we enjoy the Old Testament is because those stories are given to us as examples to follow. They're stories that happened to the Israelites for us to learn from. So oftentimes they're cautionary tales. Nevertheless, we are to learn from them and to use them in our lives in a meaningful way. So that will become important later. As we get started in 1 Samuel chapter 30 today, I hope all of you read this. This is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. I love this chapter of the Bible. It's just a climax of everything that's been happening so far in 1 Samuel. It really ties everything together. The setting is Ohio State University. About 6 or 7 years ago, in a huge lecture hall of about 1,000 students for a calculus final. You ever take a calculus final? Oh yeah. Apparently this particular calculus teacher was not well liked. He was one of those guys who would stand at the front of the class and yell out how much time was remaining before the end of a test. A real charmer. He was so busy gallivanting around the room, making sure that nobody cheated, that everyone was aware of how much time they had left before their failure on the test was complete. He had the students stack the completed test on a huge podium at the front of the room. This, however, made for quite a mess, as there were about 1,000 students. During this particular final, one guy entered the test needing a decent grade to pass. His only problem with calculus was that he did poorly when he was rushed, and the guy standing at the front of the room barking out how much time was left before the test didn't help at all. He figured he wanted to assure himself of a good grade, so he hardly flinched when the professor said, "Pencils down, and submit your Scantron sheets and work to piles in the front of the room." 5 minutes turned into 10, 10 turned into 20, 20 turned into 40. Then almost an hour after the test was officially over, our friend put down his pencil, gathered his work, and headed to the front of the hall to submit his final. The whole time, the professor sat at the front of the room, strangely waiting for the student to complete his exam. "What do you think you're doing?" the professor asked as the student stood in front of him, about to put down his exam on one of the neatly stacked piles of papers. The professor had plenty of time to stack those papers while he waited, and it was clear that the professor had waited only to give that student a hard time. "I'm turning in my exam," retorted the student confidently. "Well, I have some bad news for you," the professor gloated. "Your exam is an hour late. You failed, and I will see you next term." The student smiled slyly and asked the professor, "Do you know who I am?" "What?" said the professor, annoyed that the student showed no sign of emotion. The student rephrased the question mockingly. "Do you even know what my name is?" "No," snarled the professor. The student looked the professor dead in the eyes and said slowly, "I didn't think so," as he lifted up one of the stacks halfway and shoved his test neatly into the center of the stack, and he let the stack fall, burying his test in the middle. He turned around and walked casually out of that huge lecture hall. Did you have a test this week? You may not have had a calculus final, but just because you're out of school doesn't mean you don't take tests anymore. We face tests every day. Are you going to do what God wanted you to do this week? And He's going to test you. You know what, Lord, I'm ready to share Jesus with somebody this week. And tomorrow He's going to bring somebody, and there's your test. Are you going to do what you said you were going to do? We get tested all the time. All the time. One of the laws of the teacher is this: there is no teaching without testing. And if God is going to be trying to teach you stuff, He's going to have to test you to see if you've actually learned it. So we get tested all the time. It's not a matter of whether or not you get tested. The question is, do you realize and recognize when you get tested? You know who else had a test? David. For the last, 7 to 10 years, David has been hunted by Saul. He's been on the run, hiding in caves and forests. He's been on the run for the last 7 to 10 years. And before that, do you remember what was happening in the life of David? I mean, you got to really go back. God was trying to teach this guy some stuff. And those lessons concluded. He began to be on the run, and God worked with him. God showed him some stuff. There were some, we'll say, quizzes in there. But now we reach chapter 30. This climactic battle here at the end of 1 Samuel between the Philistines and Israel. As you remember, Saul has tried to go to the medium to figure out what he should do. He resurrects up Samuel in that bizarre story. He's been in the back lines with Achish because they're about to head out into battle. He gets sent away. Remember where he gets sent away to? Starts with a Z. Ziklag. Very good. He gets sent away to Ziklag. And that's kind of where we ended last week. He gets sent away. These two armies are going to clash. The Philistines didn't want David a part of their group, so they sent him packing, sent him back to Ziklag. And as we get into chapter 30, we're going to see that God wants you to see His final test for David. As we reach chapter 30, God wants you to see His final test for David. There's 3 elements to this test as we go through chapter 30. Verses 1 through 6, the first element, the devastating direction that David encounters. Boy, it's not good. Second element to this test, verses 7 through 20, the divine direction that David experiences. And the third element to this test, verses 21 through 31, the developing direction that David explores. Now, as we go through this, I want you to see, if you're somebody that takes really good notes, go back to chapters 17, 18, 19, and 20. Do you remember what God was trying to teach David? We went through those chapters, and we talked about each one of those lessons. And if you took notes, you should probably have them. And see, what was God trying to teach David in those chapters? And will you see in this chapter where David demonstrates that, yes, he learned those lessons. Now, I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag until the end, of course. But as we go through this, try to figure out What are those lessons that we learned in 17, 18, 19, and 20? And where does he demonstrate that he learns them in this chapter? This is why we take good notes. Verses 1 through 6, the devastating direction that David encounters. Now it happened when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. They did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. So David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives, their sons, their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him lifted up their voices and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in his Lord his God. The devastating direction that David encounters. Can you imagine? He just got dismissed from the Philistines and got sent back home to Ziklag. Took him 3 days to get there. And when he gets back, he finds that that city has been destroyed and everybody taken captive by the Amalekites. Is it spinning? Are the gerbils going? Amalekites. Think. Amalekites. We've read about Amalekites, haven't we? When did we read about the Amalekites? What happened with the Amalekites? Now this goes back to chapter 15. So we got to really go back into the archives. We're talking 14 weeks ago. What happened with the Amalekites? Saul was supposed to do what with the Amalekites? Kill them all. Very good. Saul was supposed to kill them all. God had given him very clear and specific instructions. You go and you kill all the Amalekites, from the youngest to the oldest to the king. Everybody needs to be done, gone, dead, destroyed, annihilate the entire group of them, all the way up and down. No quarter given to any of them. Did he do that? Nope. And now here, who is the thorn in the side of David? The Amalekites. I wonder if God knew what he was doing when he said, go kill them all. You know, when God tells you to do something, I would highly encourage you to do it. And do it completely, do it fully. Don't do it halfway. Don't do it to the extent that you think that it's okay. You do it fully. Because now David at Ziklag has encountered the wrath of the Amalekites. When all their people have been taken captive, the city is under siege and under fire and destroyed. And now it's like, oh man, can you imagine getting dismissed like that from Achish's group and have to go home 3 days? They probably just trotted along. They reach Ziklag to find this destruction and devastation. What would go through your mind? I thought God wouldn't do this to me if I was following him. How dare God allow this to happen while I'm away? I thought that God loved me. You ever think stuff like that? If God really loved me, he would not allow X, Y, or Z to happen to me. And now here I come home, Ziklag is burned, my wives have been taken captive with my children. This isn't fair, this is not okay. Is that what you would think? I know a lot of people that would think even worse than that. And I suspect at some point in our life we've asked God, what are you doing? Why would you allow this to happen? We might even say that on Tuesday. Why are you letting this happen? What are you thinking? As if, we're going to chide God somehow. Why did you allow this to happen? I think that the men that were with David, there were 600 men that were with David. I think that the majority of those guys felt that exact way. And you know how I know that? Verse 6. The people spoke of stoning him. They were not happy. If you're going to be our leader, and we're going to follow God because you're following God, then this should have never happened. And you're to blame because you're in charge. This is all your fault. You should have been telling God not to have this happen. We shouldn't have been so far away. We shouldn't have been 3 days away. Or whatever it is they're complaining about. They decide the right course of action is we need to stone this guy. How do you suspect David is feeling at this point? This is some devastating news that Ziklag has been destroyed. Your wives, your children, everybody's wives and everybody's children has been taken captives by a group of people that should have been annihilated a long time ago. You got your group of guys that are supposed to be loyal to you, wanting to stone you. I don't know about you, but probably just want to go curl up in bed and kind of wish it all away. I mean, that would take out a weak person quickly. Because oftentimes that's what we do. This is a pretty heavy experience right here. There's a lot of things that we go through in life that we just can't even hardly deal with. And David is dealing with this. And what is David's solution? When you go through something that sucks, when you have something happen to you that you don't like, when you have something happen to you that really cuts you to the core and really makes you question the meaning of life, what do? Where do you go? Where do you turn? Who do you talk to for help? What is your response? And the end of verse 6 is one of my favorite sentences in all of the Bible. What does it say that David did? But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. What in the world does that mean? Boy, that's one of those cliches, isn't it? Boy, that just sounds really great. He strengthened him. What does that even mean? How does that work? Well, instead of being all self-pitying and self-wallowing and woe is me, he spends time with the Lord. Maybe for us that might look like reading our Bible, praying, maybe calling somebody, strengthening ourselves in the Lord, reminding ourselves that God is in charge, God is in control. I realize the Amalekites have done this. I realize that this is what happened, but God is still in control, and I can still trust God. In spite of something bad that has happened, I can still trust God. I would encourage you that when bad things, what seem like bad things happen, you can still trust God for everything. I defy you to come up with a scenario or a situation where you cannot trust God. This was a pretty devastating direction for David to face. And he strengthens himself in his Lord, his God. Try that next time something bad happens. Instead of blaming God, instead of blaming somebody else, instead of passing the buck, just strengthen yourself in God. Go to the Bible, read something important, read something that is really meaningful for you. Find something in here that you can learn, something that you can share with somebody. Find something that means a lot to you. Whatever it is you got to do, journal, pray about it. Strengthen yourself in God. Remind yourself of his goodness and his promises. David just didn't throw in the towel when something bad happened. And as we think about this final test for David, did he pass this part? He sure did. As king, he's going to experience worse things than this. Oftentimes as we go through life, we think, this is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life, and you got to go, so far. This is the worst thing that's happened to you so far. This is pretty bad, but you just wait until he becomes king, and he's going to be king for almost 40 years. He's going to wish for this. And he strengthens himself in the Lord his God. Because if he can't strengthen himself in God as a result of this, how do you think he's going to do as king? He passed. Nice. Second element. So what does he do next? Verse 7 through 20. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and the 600 men who were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 stayed behind, who were so weary that they could not cross the brook Besor. Then they found an Egyptian in the field, and brought him to David. They gave him bread, and he ate. They let him drink water. They gave him a piece of cake and figs and 2 clusters of raisins. So when he had eaten, his strength came back to him, for he had eaten no bread nor drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? He said, I am a young man from Egypt, a servant of an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion of the southern area of the Chethonites and the territory which belongs to Judah, and of the southern area of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, can you take me down to this troop? So he said, swear to me by God that you will neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this troop. And when he had brought him down, there they were, spread out over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of the great spoil which they had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. Then David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. So David recovered all the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything which they had taken from them. David recovered all. Then David took all the flocks and herds they had driven before those other livestock and said, this is David's spoil. This is the divine direction that David experiences as he realizes that Ziklag has been burnt to the ground and everybody has been taken away captive. First thing he does is what? He inquires of the Lord. He had strengthened himself in the Lord his God, and he inquires of the Lord, what should I do? What a great example to follow. What a great example of somebody who should be king. Somebody that's learned some kind of lesson along the line in their life. Somebody that's been taught well. When something happens, you inquire of the Lord, what should I do? Oftentimes we're too flippant. We just go rush in. What's the name of that? Only fools rush in. David inquired of the Lord, what should I do? He said to the priest, bring me the ephod. This is the garment that the priest would wear, and it would house the Urim and the Thummim. He uses this equipment, and he says, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake him? And God says, pursue, you shall surely overtake him and recover all without fail. Nice. That a boy, David. Inquire of the Lord, figure out what you're supposed to do, figure it out, get a plan, and then go do it. When God says pursue them and recover all, by golly, you need to go and pursue them and recover it all. Stop making excuses for why you can't do it. Remember Joshua and Caleb and the spies? I don't know if we can do it. They look pretty big and mean over there. I'm not sure this is a good idea. If God says to go down and take it, you better go down and take it. When God tells him, go and pursue them and you will recover all, you better go and pursue them. Yeah, but I don't know where they went. I don't know where to go. I don't know what they look like. I don't know how long they've been gone. I don't know what direction to take. Excuse, 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 excuse. David did not make one excuse. We are good as people as, making excuses for why we can't or shouldn't, or I'll do it tomorrow, or some kind of nonsense like this. God says, go take them, pursue them, recover all, and David went with the 600. Boom, just like that. Let's go. They come to the brook Besor, where 200 decide to stay behind. Now you may think of them as weenies or something. I don't know. 600 men go with David. They reach the brook Besor. 200 of them are weary from all the travel. Remember, they've been traveling for 3 days already to get from where they were at with Achish to get now to Ziklag. Devastating news that Ziklag has been destroyed and everybody's been taken captive. Now they go down to the brook Besor. No cars, mind you. They're huffing it on foot. I suppose some of them may have animals to ride, but they're huffing it on foot this whole time. And 3 days march for an army on foot is a long time. And so once they reach the brook Besor, and 200 of them decide that we'll stay and guard the supplies. Okay. They end up finding an Egyptian in a field. Now, what are the chances of that? What are the chances? The older I get, what am I going to say? The older I get, the less I believe in coincidences. What are the chances that they find this Egyptian in a field? They brought him to David, gave him some bread, gave him some water, because the poor guy hasn't eaten in 3 days. Then David says, what's going on here? Remember, when David walks into this conversation with this Egyptian that they find in the field, they have no idea what's going on. He may or may not be related to this event or not. To whom do you belong, and where are you from? I am a young man of Egypt, servant of an Amalekite. Okay? And my master left me behind 3 days ago because I fell sick. We made an invasion. Oh boy, you made a what? All of a sudden, he's got David's attention now. We made an invasion of Judah. We made an invasion of Ziklag. Oh boy. Is God in this, guys? God is in everything. The sooner you realize that, the better off we're all going to be. God is in everything. There isn't a moment, there isn't a situation, there isn't an opportunity that God is not somehow vested in some way. God is in everything, and He's everywhere. His fingerprints are on everything. It's not a matter of whether or not His fingerprints are there. The question is, do you see them? Are you looking for them? Do you recognize them? We made an invasion in Ziklag. Aha. Thank you, Lord. David said, can you take me down to this troop? And the guy says, well, just don't hand me over to him once you find him, and I'll take you there. And they find him in verse 16. They find him. They're singing, they're dancing, they're hooping it up. They won a lot of spoil. Don't get me wrong, they clashed pretty hard and they got a lot of spoil. And so they're dancing and partying. David attacked them from twilight until the evening of the next day. Not a man escaped except 400 of them that rode out on camels. And what happens? Exactly as God said was going to happen is exactly what happened. David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, and David rescued his 2 wives, and nothing of theirs was lacking, either great or small, sons or daughters. David recovered everything, just as God had said. David did a great job of following the direction of the Lord. When God said, do this, David did it. No questions, no hesitation, no excuses. God went and did it. Because as God is trying to train this young man to be the king over Israel, he wants somebody that's going to follow him with his whole heart. No excuses, no compromising, no nonsense. God wants somebody to listen to him. And when he says, go and pursue them and recover all, when David does that, did he pass? You bet he did. David is passing this final exam with flying colors. How awesome is this? Then we come to this developing direction. David came to the 200 men who had been so weary they could not follow David, whom they made stay at the brook Besor. So they went out to meet David and met the people who were with him, and when David came near, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless men of those who went with David answered and said, because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we've recovered, except for every man's wife and children, that he may lead them away and depart. What do you think of that, by the way? So the 400 who went out to battle, as they're coming back. They're going back home to Ziklag, presumably. They at least got to the brook Besor, at least as far as this is concerned. They regroup with the other 200, so now they're back to being 600 strong. The 400 say to the 200, since y'all didn't come with us and do the actual fighting, you guys are only going to get your kids and your wives back. And you're going to be thankful for that, because you didn't come and fight with us. And it makes very clear that the ones who are saying this were the worthless and wicked. So what do you think of that? Should those 200 be given a portion of the spoil, or are these guys right? Maybe they're right. Should they only get their children and their wives? David's got a choice to make. The man of God, the future king, he's passed the first two elements of this test so far. What's he going to do? Do these 200 deserve more than their wives and kids? What do you think? Verse 23, David said, we're getting to the part now when David speaks, we're going to start to listen. My brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given us, who has preserved us and delivered into our hand the troop that came against us. For who will heed you in this matter? But as his part is, who goes down to the battle, so shall his part be who stays with the plies. They shall share alike. David has spoken. And what did he say? It does not matter if you're part of the 200 or the 400. Everybody is going to share in the spoil alike. Well, that sounds kind of dumb. I remember back in COVID days, and we got to go COVID days, 2020, go all the way back to 2020. Now at Fairway, during the days of COVID, one of the things that Fairway did in their infinite wisdom and generosity towards us who were working there, decided to give us some free paid absence time. Cool. We all got the same amount. And there were several people who said to me, that is stupid. I work 40, 50 hours a week. I've been busting my chops in this place day in and day out during this pandemic. And there are people who are working 5 hours a week. I should be getting more than them. Does that sound familiar? So why do we read the Old Testament? What was I able to say to these guys who were complaining about this? Why do we read the Old Testament? These stories are given to us as examples so that when we go out into our world and minister, we have real world examples of how does God deal with, how do the people of God deal with situations or circumstances that happen in our lives. Was there a story that I could tell these people at that time to explain to them that it's not wrong to give everybody the same, regardless if you work 5 hours or 40? Is there a story that I could share? Guess what story I shared with these people? When David went down with 400 people to Ziklag, or from Ziklag, and go down and fight to recover the stuff from Ziklag, whether it was the 400 who fought or the 200 who stayed behind, everybody's going to share in the spoil alike. That might not make sense to you, but this is the way it is. Now, what was David's reason for why this was okay? What foundation did he base this reason on? It's in verse 23. My brethren, you shall not do so with what the Lord has given to us. Who won this battle? Was it the 400? It was not. The old saying is the battle belongs to the Lord. And when you win a battle, you didn't win the battle. God won the battle. You just happened to be there. God could have won all that spoil back with about 3 of those guys if he wanted to. It didn't matter if there were 400 going and fighting and 200 staying with supplies. It could have been 400 staying with supplies and 200 going into battle. It does not make any bit of difference to God. God is able to win the day no matter what. God is the one who wins these fights. Why do those 400 get a claim over what God has done over the 200? They don't. We all share in the spoil the same because God fights for us all equally. So we're going to share in the spoil equally. David was correct. He did a great job. He passes all of these tests. And then it's going to go on to say that he's going to make this a statute and an ordinance to Israel to this day, whenever that day is. Must have been sometime after this was written. He created a new era of understanding of how God works in the battles of Israel. And then David ends up sending some spoil to his friends, a present from the spoil of the enemies of the Lord, making a name for himself that he really is God's chosen. Now, as we've gone through this, do you remember those 4 lessons from chapters 17 through 20? What were those lessons? The first lesson was trust in chapter 17 when he fought Goliath. Remember that? He can trust God to fight his battles for him. So in verse 9, David trusts God. When God says, go do it, he went and did it. Chapter 18 was wisdom. Did David demonstrate being wise? He sure did. In verse 7, David wisely asked Abiathar for the ephod to inquire of the Lord. Very wise. Chapter 19 was being generous. Did David demonstrate being generous in this exam? He sure did. In verse 23, David generously gives the spoil to everybody. What about loyalty? Did God taught him some loyalty. Did David learn that loyalty? Did he pass this test? In verse 6, David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He stayed loyal to God. When God says, I'm looking for a man after my own heart, I'm looking for somebody who's going to always look to me for what they need. I need somebody who's going to be a king over Israel, who's going to look to me for everything. And I'm going to teach David, a man after my own heart, I'm going to teach him these lessons. I'm going to let him fail a couple of times. I'm going to show him. I'm going to work with him. I'm going to train him up so that he could be king and shepherd over my people. And in this final exam, how did he do? He passed. And very shortly after this, he's going to be king, but we won't get into that because that's in 2 Samuel. But God did a great job with him, training him, working with him, helping him out. You know, he does the same thing for us. He's trying to teach you lessons, trying to help you understand certain things. Then he's going to test you on it. Are you passing these tests? Are you doing well? For the glory of God. Let's pray.